All right, so I want to talk a little bit about that quest that we created and that we looked through a few days ago. So I'm going to run my code really quick, and we're going to look at how we actually make that work. So the few things we're going to go through is clicking on objects and letting those objects react to that click in some way. So we have two scripts that are going to handle this. The first script is going to be a Raycast script, and the second script is going to be a kind of receive Raycast. So one thing I do want to mention really quick is you see how you can see my mouse cursor? You're going to see a piece of code in the Raycast script that controls that, and I just want to make you aware. So watch what happens when I press the close button. The cursor goes away, and that's desired behavior. So I'll show you where I do that, and it's going to happen in the same script that handles raycasting, because I want that to be the only script that handles camera control. Awesome. So when you come up here, now if I'm pretty far away and I click on this, you'll see nothing happens, and we'll talk about distancing in a second. So as I come closer, I click on this, and the next little piece pops up. Awesome. So I'm doing that by raycasting. Raycasting is a really powerful tool in games. Any game that you play that's like a first-person shooter, for example, uses raycasting. Really important. I'm hoping that you spend some time with the students talking to them about why raycasting is so important, because it's kind of one of those tools that if they don't have, it's going to hurt them down the line. So let's go ahead and hop into. So this is the only script aside from my look script that'll be attached to my camera. So it'll handle a few other things, and I mentioned that previously. So the first thing we need to do is get the camera component. If you go back and look at the camera, which should be attached to the player, it has a component actually called camera, and that's what allows it to do camera-related things. So we set up a variable of that type, and then I create a float for hit distance, and that's what prevents me from being able to click on that object from across the scene. Cool, we get the component for camera. Done this countless times so far, easy, easy. Okay, let's jump in the update loop. And as remember, the update loop happens every frame. It's the main game loop. So what we're doing is if the player presses the left mouse button, 0 is the left mouse button. And I know that from looking at the Unity input manager, and you could do the same if you'd like. I think it's 0 and 1 are the two primary mouse buttons. And then Unity also services all the additional buttons that can be on a mouse too. But 0 is left. Okay, so when the player presses the left mouse button, we're going to set up a variable. Now, we could set this vector3 up outside of the update loop. We could set that up in start or in the attribute somewhere, but it's fine to have it here. So what this is going to do is it's going to grab the center of the screen, and you can see that we grab the width of the pixels and the height of the pixels and divide them by 2 to get that direct center of the X and Y coordinates. So pretty easy. There, we're just getting that mathematical position. Then we create a array of data type ray, and right now this is just geometry. This has nothing to do with a raycast yet. This is just geometry. So we call it ray. That's convention. We're going to set that to equal to camera, and then we're going to use this screen point to ray. So what that does is it looks for a point on the screen that we've given it as the parameter that we passed, and it creates a geometric ray starting at that point. And again, we haven't raycasted yet. We're just setting up the math. So we create that ray, and we set it to the center of the screen, as you can see above, screen point. Okay, then the next thing we do is we set up a raycast hit. Now, this is the first thing that we're looking at in terms of raycasting that's going to be unique to the raycast itself. So what this is, let's see if it actually gives anything back from the helper text. Okay, structure used to get information back from the raycast. And that's exactly what it is. The raycast is actually looking for a collider. And what this is doing is it's giving us all the information it can about raycasting. And it's not like it actually grabs the object and can tell us everything about it. What it can really tell us is the position that it happened, and it can tell us a little bit about the collider. And that's what we're going to use going forward, is the position. Cool. So then what we're going to do is if we put the raycast in an if condition. That's just how it's done. It evaluates true or false if the ray hits something. So we use physics.raycast. This is Unity's physics engine, and then the raycast is a method that Unity uses for raycasting. And you can see it has 15 overloads. We will use a few of those. And I'm not going to go over them today because we probably won't use them until I get back. So for now, we have our Raycast, and the overload we're going to use is the actual ray. So it's going to cast the ray at that position of the ray that we created a few lines above. The information it's going to receive is from Raycast hit, and we called that hit. And then lastly, we give it a hit distance, which, as you can see, is a float value of a maximum distance. All good stuff. So that's what's actually creating the Raycast. And it, like, when I talk about this in class, I like to use my laser pointer and show that that's exactly what this is doing. And where that little dot shows up, that's the Raycast hit. That's all the information you're getting back from the Raycast. And this is where you'd probably want to lead a small discussion on how you can actually use this in games, because they will probably use this in almost every project here on out. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And just for examples you can give them, it's used in point and click games. So if you ever play a game where you're like just clicking on the screen, like even like a card game like Solitaire, if you're just clicking on the screen to click a card, raycasting is how nowadays you would do that. If you are picking up an item, if you're clicking on anything, raycasting is usually the top way to do it, especially if you have a crosshair that you can check to see if something's in the center of something else. Okay, so that's what the Raycast is doing, and I hope you lead a mini discussion with the class on that. Sweet. Then if that Raycast evaluates as true, then we're going to get some information back from the hit. And so in this case, we get our hit, and we know, and let me show you what we can get from hit. So hit. So I actually don't use many of these. Distance is really powerful, especially if you want to know how far away something is and then have a condition set to make something happen. I've used Collider before. I actually have never used rigid body. I've used point quite a few times, but mainly transform is my go-to when I want to grab a game object. Yeah, that's all good stuff. Point will give you the exact position of the Raycast hit, which is pretty good. I might demo that a little bit later because you can like create things like game objects at that point, and it can be kind of fun. Okay, so hit, and then we get our transform, and if you recall, all game objects have a transform component. That's how they exist in space. So that means we can use the transform to get the actual game object. So that's what we're doing here. Then we're using this C# tool called send message. Send message is kind of weird. I really like it. It's not very, it's pretty performance damaging. You're not going to see like high-end games using send message. It's really useful for what we're doing. So send message, what that's going to do is it's going to take the game object and it's going to look at every single component attached to it. Whether those components are C# scripts that you created or Unity built-in components, which again are classes themselves. And it's going to send a method call. So it's going to see, do you have a method called react to touch? If you do, call that method. So it's going to call, it's going to call the method react to touch, and I'll get to that in a second, what we do with that. So it looks for anything that you have that has a method called react to touch and then calls it. This next piece, send message options, there are a few send message options. I don't use many of them. Don't require receiver is really important, because if any one of the components on the object does not have this react to touch method, and you don't have this don't require receiver, it will throw an error. And I can't recall if it crashes Unity or not, but it will give an error. I can't recall how detrimental it is, but it's something you want to avoid. And when you teach it, pretty much require that they do this. Okay, and that's really it. That's the magic. And what's so awesome about this is the player really only needs this one script for raycasting. And that's it. Because everything in the game should be able to, if it can be raycasted against, react to a touch. So even if your character has like a projectile or a weapon, then the opponent should be able to react to the touch and take damage if necessary. So it's kind of cool. It's like a one-size-fits-all tool, unless you want it to have a different hit distance, which you could change the variable depending on if you have a weapon or something that like has a different range. So it's kind of cool. And then if something reacts to you pointing and clicking it, it does that something. So cool way to set this up. It makes making games pretty easy. Down here, Since this is the only script that I want to be able to control my camera, just for performance reasons and simplicity, I have two methods that turn the cursor on and off. You can take a look at them if you want. I use them throughout the game when I want the player to have access to their mouse cursor. But I keep them here. Cool. Let's take a look at the temple button. So I just want to go from here, react to touch. So when I press the temple button, that I don't know, stone slab that I click on that game object, it's got a script that has this react to touch method. So we'll see that here. I want to make sure it's recording that. Okay, cool. Okay, so I've got my method react to touch, as you'd expect. And when you click it now, these two things above, what they do, so this right here, it's what makes the, it gives me that UI that pops up when I press that stone slab, and the player can read the next part of the story. This is another method just called player UI. We'll go through that later. It's not a big deal. Castle gate. This is the entire empty game object that holds all of those objects that were guarding that castle, so all those pillars, along with the collider that prevented the player from getting up to the castle. This is how I set that to true and false, so this actually makes it go away, so it's part of the quest. So here's where the magic is happening, the react to touch method. So what we have here is, this is just grabbing that player UI component and telling the message to pop up. Don't worry too much about this. I don't really want to. If you want to, you can teach GameObject.find. It's super powerful, but it's performance detriment. So what this does, GameObject.find, is kind of cool. Students may like to use it. It's going to literally look through the entire hierarchy and try and find a game object called player. And it's a string literal, so you have to make sure they're spelling it right. So it's trying to find the game object called player, and you can imagine it's looking through game objects, and if there are children of that game object, it's looking through them too. And if you have a full-on AAA game, this could take a long time. But this is how I turn on that that message, that story message. Next, yeah, so the rest of this is really all about opening and closing that gate. So if the player UI story message is true, so pretty much what this is doing is checking to see that I clicked on that first slab. If I did that and then I go click on the temple slab, then sweet, I set the castle gate to false, and the player gets the temple story. None of this is important for what you're doing. The main thing that they need to see is that react to touch can do something, whatever you want it to do. There's a couple ways you can demo it. You can demo it just by playing my game, or you can make a really simple scene, and this could be a good challenge for you, where if you click on the wall changes color. That might be kind of fun. That's actually really easy, and there's a small tutorial for doing that in that book I gave you, but it uses a physics overlap sphere, so it does it differently. But you could give them a look at what you can do with this react to touch. All right, awesome. Caleb, I really hope this helps you. My hope is that they see this, or that you're able to teach this effectively. This is such a powerful tool in game design that every game they've played uses raycasting, and it'll help them develop their quest. All right, this video has gone on too long, so thank you, and I hope this helped you.